All right. And with that, we'll pass it over to our esteemed.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Chad. Why don't you go to the next slide there? So hi, everybody. Greg Baker with VIC. I just wanted to do a quick introduction, kind of welcome to everybody. But before we get started, a little bit of housekeeping. So just FYI, we'll be recording this. You know, we're going to do some Mentimeters, which are super fun. Make sure I'm going to be monitoring the chat for Wendy and Chad. If you got some good ideas or you have any questions, I'll try to keep a handle on it. And then we're going to do a bunch of breakout groups. So that's going to be super fun. I think there's going to be a lot of people, so we're going to try to have extra breakout groups to make that even more fun. So why don't we go to the next slide? So this is the leadership team. But before we get started, I know there's some ACEEE people on this call, and I just wanted to congratulate and thank ACEEE for a great conference last week. You know, it was really enjoyable. You know, a lot of great presentations. The virtual platform actually offered everyone in attendance a chance to, you know, ask thoughtful questions, interact through the chat, which was really good. And actually at the conference, there was actually a lot of SEM conversation already, even before today. You know, Genevieve London, Peter Bassett, Zach Podell, just to name a few. And then of course on Thursday, Wendy and moderated a great session with Tamara, Glenda, Walt, and Ethan on the future of SEM, or the current state of SEM, I guess. So I just wanted to thank everyone. That was really good stuff, and hopefully, you know, today we'll continue that conversation once again. You know, my next thank you is just to the leadership team, all the people on the screen. Well, we're on the screen. They're now on the screen. I just wanted to thank everyone on the leadership team. We've put a lot of time into helping make this organization kind of stand up on its own. And I also want to thank their organization. So if, you know, they put a lot of time, and we're all volunteers. So, you know, it's a big commitment, not only from the individual, but from the organization to allow that time. So I'm just going to run through the names because everyone needs to hear their name at least once. Shelley Jensen of Ohio, Idaho Power, Peter Bassett, Energy Performance Systems, Chad Gillis, Stillwater Energy, John Nickel of Leidos, Walt Tennyson from EPA, Wendy Gibson, of course, from Energy Trust, Giselle Procacante from NEAT, Derek Okada from Southern California Edison, and Katie Dooley from NYSERDA. So thank you to all. Let's go to the next slide. So I also want to be appreciative of our sponsors of the summit. You know, helping us, you know, support this event is notable, and we appreciate the support. Next slide. And then, of course, to our members, you know, we made that push this year to actually start trying to stand up on our own and raise money. And all these members stepped to the plate with great contributions. I appreciate everyone's contributions. You know, and special shout out to Southern California Gas Company and Cascade Energy for their silver and gold memberships as well. You know, the key there, and this is all for the leadership team, now we need to show value. We're stepping into, you know, another level. So thank you for the members. Thank you for believing in this organization, seeing the potential of building a great collaboration across North America. We hope to prove the value to you in the coming year. Next slide. And now it's off to Wendy.
I think that's my cue. Thanks, Greg. And you didn't thank yourself. So I will thank you for you. Thanks for being our fearless leader. We appreciate it. All right, today's agenda. So we're doing something a little different this year. Actually, two pretty different things. You'll notice that the SEM Summit has moved from a one-day format to a two-day format, which we're excited about. So a little bit shorter time each day, but a little bit extra time. A lot of that comes with your feedback about wanting more time to discuss things. So today it's going to feel a little bit more traditional with the SEM Summits, with one exception. And then tomorrow we're going to dig into some good breakout groups. To that end, the second thing that we're doing, which is a little different, is that you guys will remember we did a call for topics. And so really the North American SEM Collaborative Leadership Team is just herding cats this time. We're just trying to move everybody around, get the whole community's ideas out there. So we had a joy of working with most of the people that submitted call for topics. So thank you for doing that. And because of that, we came up with a theme, which is to infinity and beyond. So really the last year of SEM has been, the last year of life really has been pretty intense. So we're going to look at where we are now. And then we're going to look at what we're learning. We have a really great presentation around SEM and resiliency and kind of getting your guys' feedback on that, and then kind of where we could head. And that where we could head is really going to tee us up for tomorrow. Speaking of which, let's talk about tomorrow's agenda. So tomorrow's agenda is going to be digging into the QMR, as we're calling them, the quarterly member roundtable topics that we talked about at the quarterly member roundtable in May. So we polled all the members that we had at that time and said, what are you guys interested in? If you could have an expert in your midst for SEM, what would you want to talk to them about? And we had some things kind of raised to the top, which were capital measure reconciliation, greenhouse gas integration, and future design possibilities. And then we also are taking our funded research and kind of digging into those topics. So we're taking some of the stuff we learned from the quarterly member roundtable, and we're going to be digging in with breakout groups. So today we're going to be kind of thinking about where we are and where we're headed. And tomorrow we're really going to be digging into that. So we're excited to talk about it. And speaking of members, you saw the list of everybody who was a member. And you may be asking, well, what do I get if I become a member? So here is our member benefits that we've designated. If you haven't already become a member, we encourage you to do so. The SEM Summit will always be open to everybody. The quarterly member roundtables will just be for members, and they will be making decisions around how we're funding research and stuff like that, and how we're moving the North American SEM collaborative forward. Some of the other stuff to just remember is kind of what our mission is. So if you want to go to the next slide there, Chad. That'd be great. So, you know, we are always here for the entire community. And part of that is around, you know, understanding what your priorities are as stakeholders, which is why we do a summit every year to understand where we should be headed. And then, you know, we're really here to make sure that we communicate the interests of the group, you know, both that is through ACEEE and up through some of the lobbying efforts that they do, and also just by supporting some of the infrastructure that SEM is creating. So we're going to be here. We're going to continue to evolve. Speaking of evolving, I feel like I'm doing really good segues right now. So here's the 2020 year in review. We did a lot this year. We expanded our leadership team. So we had some members roll off. We got a new leadership team, and we added an additional member. We started a membership group, and then we wrapped up our first funded research, and we're starting to look at next steps for that. So that's an exciting moment for us. I think that was about 18 months to 2 years in the making. Some great work, I believe funded at least partially by DOE, a lot of ACEEE support, and of course LBNL through DOE. Also the webinars, did a lot of those, and quarterly member roundtables. So there's just a lot of stuff that we're doing, that we're expanding. And we're continuing to need your support to do it. So speaking of which, let's figure out who you guys are. Chad, I believe we have a Mentimeter now.
All right, so you are all familiar with Mentimeter, and if you're not, you're about to be very familiar with it. Open a new browser window on your computer or on your phone. Either one will work fine, and go to menti.com and type in the digits at the top of the screen here, which are 8151963. I wonder if I can put that in the chat. Let me try that. All right, hold on one second with this as well. Chat. And yeah, you're going to type in your response to the question of who's here. What type of organization are you with? And so we got program administrator, program implementer, program evaluators, program designers / advisors. Then I put like government agencies that are not program administrators, NGOs, again, that are not administrators, or other. If you're other, put yourself in a chat if you didn't get captured in one of those other 6 categories. I love the dots, by the way.
I love how they fly out of nowhere. I kind of feel like I'm playing dodgeball, actually.
Yeah, yeah. And then they show up and then they're kind of wiggling around. It's like you guys are all kind of bumping into each other. You're like, oh, I'm here too.
Oh, it's like you're networking at a conference of sorts.
Yeah, yeah. So we have, how many attendees do we have, Andrew, roughly today?
There are 105 on the call.
105 on the call, 84 responses so far. So I'll give you another moment. If you haven't gone there yet, menti.com. You will go here again many times. So go ahead and get started now. This is your practice run. So this is good of you to be here. Well, wonderful. I'm glad we've got a good dispersion of types of people from types of organizations. Many of which, looking at the all the cams, I recognize many of you, and fortunately I've been able to get to know you, many of you over the years, and many of you that are new, which is wonderful. We're so excited to have you here. We're so excited your organization supports you to be here today. That's wonderful. So thank you all so much. And with that, any other color commentary, Wendy Gibson?
You know, the only thing that I would say is I feel like program evaluators, we gotta get more of you on here, huh? We need you guys.
Yeah.
I'm surprised that there's not as many as there are, but I will say that there were, I think, 130 registered. So maybe there's just some late in the game. Maybe some of those are some program evaluators. This is good. This is interesting.
So keep this browser window open on your computer or on your phone, because again, we'll be coming back to this several more times today. And with that, we'll go back to the presentation. Thank you all so much for responding. Okay.
All right. So in order to warm up and get to know each other, we're going to do a breakout group. So we're going to be getting into small breakout groups where we're going to have your name. You can state your name, your company. And then the discussion question for today, as we think about the future of SEM, kind of where we are versus where we're going, is with the new administration in the White House and climate change back on the table, what policies do you see affecting SEM and now into the future? And we'll probably do this for about, I would say, 10 to 15 minutes. And so, Andrew, do you want to take us away to our breakout groups, please? Were they fantastic?
They were great.
Yes.
They're very good.
I love the transporter device you guys use to move us from group to group. That's awesome.
We're going to patent it and sell it. You're going to be able to fly across country.
Chrissy Hodgson for doing some virtual glasses. That's
I see those. Those are fantastic.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Well done.
So Chad, just so you know, I can read your screens in your glasses, so I know about the...
Just be careful.
Actually, you could just start pretending like you can see into the future.
Yeah.
I know what's going to happen next.
You can see like who I'm looking at. There's Faith DeBolt, Jay Mullen, Tina Chanel. Tina, I like your haircut. Dave Hall. Yeah, I'm pointing to. Great. All right, let's do a Menti poll. Back to the menti.com. And the same code. So if your browser, if you kept that browser window open, then you should be, the screen should have refreshed. If you need to go back to it again, go to menti.com and type in whatever that code was, the 8151963. Menti.com, 8151963, used on your neighborhood computer browser or phone browser. See what yeah, it's interesting. I'm like looking at myself in my cam, seeing my screen and it's really kind of trippy.
Yeah, so there's some interesting stuff coming up. Carbon reduction is driving people to SEM. That was definitely something I heard on one of the groups I popped into. Was there's a lot of activity right now. right? With
Mhm.
kind of this recognition that maybe we lost some years, so we got to make up some time, and people are really driving towards SEM, towards a strategic way to manage their energy. That's definitely something we're seeing. Yeah, a balance of hope and skepticism. I feel that. I vacillate with that every day, actually.
It's in the Gibson household.
Yeah, that's just what I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, yeah, integrating renewables in SEM.
Yeah, expanding SEM to water utilities. I mean, not only do they, obviously have a lot of pumps, and we've looked at them from that standpoint, but, water is going to be the new frontier for sure. Kind of just from a livability standpoint, actually. Canadians have a different government. Ends up that's true too.
If you weren't aware. Yeah. Both Republicans and Democrats are interested in different aspects of SEM for sure. Social cost of carbon. Yeah.
Yeah, and actually, Chad, this is a pretty good segue, which is how will ISO 50001 based ENMS deal with greenhouse gases? That might be a pretty good segue into the next section. What do you think?
Yeah, that sounds great. With that, I'm scanning down. We'll send them, by the way, we'll capture all these notes, be able to publish these for folks to check out afterwards, but we'll flip back to the slides. Thank you all for your responses. All right.
Oh, you didn't change the dog. Darn it.
Did you think I would? So the funny thing is that I was using the free online image bank, and I think I said now or current or present, and this dog came up, and I thought, obviously we have to use this dog as a transition slide. So this dog actually has nothing to do with anything other than it's cute and adorable.
I love it. I love non sequiturs. Okay, let's get into the CE program framework. And with that, we're going to introduce Mr. Walker Larson from CEE. Walker, are you there?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Great. Yes, I think you can go to the next slide. Thanks. So this is just our mission, but yeah, I think I know many of you, but I'm Walker Larson, CE staff co-chair from the CE SEM committee, and I lead our commercial industrial work at CE. So like I said, many of you are probably familiar. Stay on the first one, please. Thanks. Most of you are probably familiar with CE as members. You may implement programs on behalf of members. And while the consortium is formally made up of program administrators, and by that I mean entities that have obligations for ratepayer funds in support of safe, affordable, reliable power, the strategies produced and supported by the consortium achieve success when they're the result of broad industry and market input and ongoing support. So just want to say thanks to everyone who has contributed to developing the CE SEM initiative and resources, like the minimum elements, and we look forward to continued collaboration as SEM programs evolve. And I also wanted to thank the leadership of the North American SEM Collaborative and ACEEE today for the opportunity to talk. The enthusiasm and work of the collaborative so far is great. We hope CE's ongoing work will benefit from the discussions, ideas, and research that result from it. And while CE engages with the DSM market with an eye to program administrator obligations, like I said, and at the direction of our board of directors, the best outcomes are the result of broad perspectives and expertise. So with that in mind, I will be sharing some initial outcomes from some of our recent work today to look for some quick feedback, and we're hoping to get some more feedback as that work continues. So with that, you can go to the next slide, and I will turn it over to the SEM committee member co-chair, Kevin Wallace, who I'm sure many of you also know.
Thanks, Walker.
Unmute. Thanks, Walker, and thanks again for allowing us to give a quick update today on CE's work. And also with so many implementers I saw in the audience there, many may not be familiar with CE and how they work, so I think this will be useful as an introduction for you. I'm just going to tee up a little bit of a backgrounder for folks. Sorry if it's redundant if you've heard it before, but as Walker mentioned, the CEE SEM initiative started around 2014 and basically started with what was described as at the time a definition of what is SEM, and that was then has become the CE minimum elements. It was reviewed in 2019 by members and felt like it was still, always looking for opportunities to improve, but suiting the purpose that it was intended to suit for the time being. So that's something that can be revised as we go forward with more input from others and as we look at it periodically. Another product resource that CE provides is program summaries. Current version is 2018. There's work underway now from all the program administrators that are members of CE to then update that with more current information about the number of SEM programs and details about those programs, and that number continues to grow over the years. The piece of work that has been ongoing for, well, almost 18 months to 2 years now is what we've called the program framework. And it basically aligns different program approaches in SEM. There's many ways to approach a customer and help them implement an SEM program within their facility or their organization. And we've collected data in the program framework. What Walker's team is now looking at is producing a report of learnings. And so today is the first step in starting to share some of those key learnings that have come out of that program framework and the data and the information that's in it. What's in development is a report. So some of the feedback today will inform that report. There'll be an opportunity to provide more input before the report is finalized. And then also another opportunity following that to discuss the report and some of the key finds in more detail at the industry partners meeting. Again, another step where CE will reach out to implementers more, and others more broadly beyond CE members to have some fulsome discussions on some of the things that they've learned and some of the feedback they've received on that report. So with that, I'll pass it back to Walker to get into some of the learnings on the program framework report that's being developed right now. Thanks, Chad.
You bet. Thanks, Chad.
Yep, and next slide. Thanks. So thanks, Kevin. And so to reiterate that invitation Kevin just sort of put forth to work with the committee and help update CE resources, ensure they continue to support SEM programs and service provider needs. A little fun fact about me, I'm actually named after Strider from Lord of the Rings. That's where Walker comes from. So if you're familiar with the story, the challenge there required assembling this diverse group with widely varying skill sets and priorities to cooperate on a common mission, convince the rest of the world to buy into the solution and support their cause to achieve this success. So at the risk of being dramatic, that's kind of the CE model. Success of the market initiatives developed by the consortium members greatly depend on the inclusion of diverse expertise and perspectives, and also with the eventual adoption of agreed upon roles and public support by that full group of folks. So as we spend a short amount of time today sharing some of these outcomes of the consortium work, please consider this an invitation to get in touch with me or Kevin, engage with the committee, and more specifically, when we share that report Kevin was talking about, we'll be reaching out and looking for some more specific comments. But next slide. So that said, we do have some opportunities and challenges to share today. One thing we learned in reviewing the framework data is how different SEM programs support customers addressing different minimum elements of SEM is that there's some confusion around terms used to describe those activities. So specifically what you see on the slide. And over the past year, both in talking just with program administrators as well as with others, third-party implementers and other folks, it's been clear we don't always use words to mean the same thing when we talk about SEM. So the CE SEM committee suggested developing a glossary of terms for talking about SEM at CE. And I want to be clear, the intent is not to reinvent the wheel here. We would certainly draw from existing credible sources and seeking input. We make some draft iterations and look for folks to comment on that. We'll provide a first sort of iteration of some definitions with that framework report. And the point is not to prescribe definitions on the market, it's to help ensure we're communicating clearly on these complex issues. And so if you read something from CE, it's hopefully easier to understand what we mean or know what we mean by certain words. But also hopefully a glossary that's collaboratively developed will support consistent terminology across the SEM market. Next slide. In addition, in assessing the framework data, it suggested an opportunity for further analysis to test whether we can demonstrate correlations between different program administrator characteristics and associated SEM program approaches to supporting customers practicing SEM. So we'll be looking at program data we already have in the framework and potentially looking for some additional data points to help explore this, providing an initial assessment in that forthcoming report. So our medium-term goal is to provide additional context to layer with existing SEM program information to help program administrators or third-party implementers have confidence in different approaches and show that different approaches are viable, and to encourage broader development and implementation of SEM across the US and Canada. So feedback on that report, we have that will be valuable and will help, hopefully it help advance learnings and maybe develop a market resource. And a third learning from the framework is that as the market for energy management technology continues to grow, there's an opportunity for the consortium potentially to define criteria for energy management technology that supports SEM program needs and supports customers practicing SEM. So for example, by that, I mean like energy management information systems when I say technology, which is why we need the glossary. Some programs support customers using EMIS or incorporating other technology like that. And we may be able to use those examples to identify applications or customer types that match well with using EMIS and what specific functionality is needed from the tools. Given that many of those attending the summit today develop and use that kind of software, feedback from you on this will be valuable, and we hope you'll weigh in. Next slide, which I believe is a question.
Great, so we'll flip over to the Mentimeter poll. So you have the opportunity now on menti.com, same code as before. The browser should have refreshed to rank these three options. Walker, would you mind just again describing for folks maybe any more color behind these behind the words and what they see here?
Yep. So the glossary, like I said, value in describing some of those terms. Again, not to be prescriptive, but just to help clarify what we mean. The framework correlations that helps demonstrate the viability of different approaches, and hopefully can be developed into some kind of a market resource. And then defining criteria is more in the kind of like traditional wheelhouse of CEE, and do that specifically around tools that help support SEM, both from a program management perspective and from customers practicing it.
Outstanding. Well, Walker, we're seeing some good responses. While folks are putting these in, I just want to compliment you and the members of your committee that have done some amazing work over the years. CE has played a very catalytic role in the SM market. And as a person, I know, Kevin, Kim Crossman, myself, a number of other folks worked on the minimum elements years ago and know firsthand what a huge impact that had. And many of you, again, also played roles that I'm not to leave folks out, I'm just calling out a few folks on this call here today. But yeah, you continue to play such, again, a very I think catalytic is the best word for it, catalytic role to really elevate what we're doing here. I'm seeing Wendy put up the five minute warning. So with that, I'm going to go back to go to the next question that you posed. I've got 70 responses, by the way. I'll just go ahead and say that's great. Which was an open-ended question. So everyone was able to rank and prioritize before, but now you've also asked, hey, just what else? What else would they want the CE program framework report to address? So this may take a moment more for folks to think about it, but if maybe Kevin or Walker, I wouldn't say additional thoughts that people could suggest, but because you can describe what this report's going to look at.
Yeah, it's almost like if you had a wish list, if there was something you hope it would, pull out and provide as feedback from how different program approaches are utilized to then help customers meet the minimum elements. Yeah, the decarbonization one, I think, will be tough given not many are looking at it. So we're dealing with existing programs and existing approaches.
And I mean, yeah, for sure. I think I'm curious. I mean, one is, of course, decarbonization has gone from being something that only Kevin Wallace talked about a few years ago to be, BC Hydro, to something that is becoming more widespread, definitely changing quickly. And so what can programs, like you said, with constraints, what can they do? But yeah, it's interesting. It's an amazing.
But saying that, that's a good. It's another piece of information in terms of decarbonization that could roll into the understanding correlations better. So it's useful in terms of maybe some further data that could be gleaned to help inform that. So it is good feedback in terms of what people would like it to address.
Yeah.
The flexible load management one is very interesting. again, we talk about annual energy savings a lot, and capacity is becoming a bigger issue. And how does SEM address time of day, time of week, or capacity and demand opportunities, in addition to carbonization and or energy savings, or decarbonization and energy savings.
This is an amazing
Best
list.
practices.
Yeah.
Best practices is another one that we thought the correlation could help. It's a question of, we know what people are doing, but do we know why they're doing it that way? Like, why does BC Hydro design it one way and ETO designs it another? And then understand, you know, what seems to work better.
That's great.
I think one last caveat put on this: there's no intent from our committee's point to make anything that we do prescriptive. That's not the intent. It's to understand best practices and what would work best. And then it's up to the individual administrator to fine-tune their program design with the help of implementers for their market, their jurisdiction, their regulations, their utility structure. Pick the program that works the best.
Great. Well, we'll wrap this up to go to the next thing, but I do want to again compliment CE and again all the members of that committee that have worked on all this incredible stuff over the years and currently, and also compliment CE's process for engaging members, their funding members, industry partners, and then the public through forums like this. So this is all great, and a big kudos to them and everyone involved with that. So with that, we'll move to our next item. And also, by the way, too, I want to say compliments also to Walker for having the best slides for referencing Lord of the Rings.
For being part of Lord of the Rings.
No.
He
For actually being in the
embodies.
movie. That was awesome.
That is, I don't know why that hasn't come out sooner, Walker. Let's be honest.
No.
I mean, these sunglasses are for your presentation, but they're kind of primarily for your name.
Yeah. We expected to pull a long sword out from behind.
That's right.
slash the next thing. So with that, we'll go to our next presenter, Walt Tennyson from US EPA. We'll be talking about the North American SEM Collaborative Database. Walt, are you there?
Yes, I am. Hey, everyone. So for the last few months, we at the some of us at the North American SEM Collaborative, myself from leadership team, plus a whole bunch of volunteers as well, who are not part of the leadership team, which is really great because it's supposed to be a collaborative and not just us leadership team doing all the work all the time. Have been working on pulling together a database directory of SEM programs in North America. And we've been helped out this summer with a great intern, Madeline, who's here today. She's a student at UVA, who has really done a lot of great work and has identified a lot of information on existing programs. And part of what this project is about is, you know, if we're the North American SEM Collaborative, it's important to know, well, where are the SEM programs in the US and Canada? What are the past ones? What are the current ones? And also, what are sort of SEM-like programs? There are other programs that may not call themselves SEM. They may be continuous improvement. They may eventually morph into SEM programs, but it's good to sort of know similar types of programs. And some of those may not actually even be utility programs. They may be programs that are run by city and states, or they may be federal government programs or state programs that have similar type of objectives. And so we want to begin to identify these types of programs, plus who works on them. Many of the people like yourself are involved in these types of programs. So it's good for us to understand who are our stakeholders, not just program administrators, but also who's involved in them, as well as other organizations that are related to supporting SEM programs, whether the regional groups like the Northwest Energy Efficiency Collaborative, Northeast, or MIA, federal programs like EPA, Energy Star, or DOE, NRCan. It's useful to know these things. So we're pulling together a database. The idea here is to identify programs and catalog some basic program attributes. This is sort of things that you would expect to know about an SEM program. Is it industrial focus? Is it commercial building focus? How long has it been operating? Is it active? Is it been sunsetted? Plus some other attributes as well. Is it using a delivery method using cohorts, or is it self-directed, and so on. Our intention here, though, is really more about inventorying programs and not evaluating programs. It's really about just collecting some basic information and not, not trying to collect this as a way to sort of assess whether someone's doing a good job or not. That's not what we're doing with this. What we want to do, if you go on to the next slide, is to be able to create a public list of programs. I think if you ask anyone in this room right now, how many SEM programs are there in North America currently operating in the United States? I'm not actually sure anyone here can answer that question. We probably all know some of the ones we work on or have heard of, but do we really know have a really complete list? So we would like to be able to answer that question. It'd be great to be able to even answer a question, how many people support working on SEM programs? Is it in the hundreds? You think about program implementers. I often get asked in my role at EPA, like, how many, what's the employment opportunity? What are the economic benefits of, in the energy efficiency world? And I'll say, you should think about some of these folks supporting SEM. Nobody really knows how many people that is. So it'd be great to be able to, for us, this group, the North American SEM Collaborative, be able to sort of provide some basic information about that. Also trends on which sectors and so forth. So we are pulling together a database, and we'd love your help. And so if you go on to the next slide, we put together a Google Doc form, and you can go in and take a look at the type of information we would love to gather. If you have information you'd like to share on the program itself, we would love for you to fill out the survey and share some of that information with us. And we will post this, I'll post this link on the chat in case you're got a down minute and want to fill it out while you're on the conference. And we've also posted it on the North American SEM Collaborative website as well. So you can also find it there. And if you don't know what that website is, I'll put that in the chat as well.
Great. Thanks so much, Walt. Outstanding stuff. So with that, we'll now go to the U.S. Department of Energy and Advanced Energy have a code presentation about the U.S. DOE's 50,001 Ready program. So I think we first start with Mr. Ethan Rogers. Ethan, are you there?
I am.
Welcome, welcome.
Yeah.
I thought you meant to say
Glad
Roger
to be
that.
back. Glad to be back. I'm so excited to see over 100 people attending the summit. This is great. It's what is this, like the fifth one you've done? Fourth, fifth one you've done? This is excellent. Yeah. So I think many of you are familiar with the Department of Energy's 50,001 Ready Navigator. It's an online platform with a lot of different resources for helping implement an energy management program that is based, the system is based on the ISO 50001 standard, hence the name 50,001 Ready, because the whole idea is that if you go through the 25 steps in our Navigator, ideally you'd be ready to pursue certification to the standard, but you can just self-attest and DOE will recognize you. And to that end, as you can see, this program has become very popular, and I think in part because it's a platform that everybody can use. We've created something that has a retail capability, but it also has this wholesale capability. We originally intended it to be kind of this do-it-yourself type of way to put in an energy management system. But what we're finding is that utility programs and consultants and implementers are using bits and pieces of it and helping organizations implement. And so we've had really good year-over-year growth in the use of this. Almost half of the growth has been in the industrial sector, but as you can see, it's being used in many other sectors. We're starting to see use of it in government programs and other agencies. So very pleased with this. Over half the people or accounts that have been set up are outside of the US. And so we're talking with, we already helped Saudi Arabia set up a program. We're talking to Canada, and we're talking with 3 other countries that may potentially set up their own Ready program. So this is cool, very cool. Next slide. Here within the US, we have a dozen different program partners. And what this means is that they can create their own kind of ready room, if you will. Because normally when you set up a project, well, let me just say that if a partner can send information to participants in their cohort. Each one of these organizations can have a tailored version, if you will, of the Navigator. And so we're finding that it's been very popular with different organizations out there. And if you'd like to learn more about it, please contact me. But I want to thank all of our partners for joining, and I hope that the program is doing well for you. But let's continue the conversation on how we can make it work better for you. Next slide. Cohorts. So back in 2020, the Federal Energy Management Program took our Navigator platform as a way of engaging several different federal agencies to help them set up energy management systems. They did this all virtually because you couldn't get federal workers to travel, to go through common training sessions like you might normally do in a cohort within a local utility service territory. And then the pandemic hit, and we're all looking around for things that we could do. And we said, well, let's do, the Advanced Manufacturing Office took the model that FEMP had set up and we ran with it. So did the Building Technology Office. And late this year, early next year, the Weatherization and Intergovernmental Programs Office, WIP, is going to do one with wastewater treatment facilities. And so this is just, it's become a great tool just within our federal fellow agencies or programs within the energy efficiency and renewable energy part of the Department of Energy. And we've also, because of this, created these specialized versions of the Navigator. So when you set up an account, you can actually select on one of these. Like if you're a government agency, a military facility, a wastewater treatment facility, you can select this and you get specialized guidance. And in the case of the wastewater treatment facility, we've even created an entire data set with all of the playbook files and folders filled out. So you can see how stuff might work for a wastewater treatment facility. As we look forward, the next step we want to do is see how we could integrate carbon management into energy management, because we believe energy management is fundamental to carbon management. And so we're going to be doing a pilot in Colorado. I think Chad is going to be involved in that. Are you not, Chad? And so we're going to test out some things and see what works, right? It's all about finding out what works. And as we move forward, our ultimate goal is to have resources within the Navigator that can help users determine, okay, sometimes I have trade-offs, right? Sometimes I might use more energy but release less carbon, or I might use less energy but release more carbon. It's good to be informed of those decisions so you can document it and be aware of it. And so we're really looking forward to doing that. I think I may have mentioned earlier that in the breakout session that DOE is all in on decarbonizing the industrial space. And so the other thing I want to say is, what else can we help you with? We think we've got this great platform, this great tool. What else can we do? And that leads me to my last slide. Speaking of what else, or what would you like us to know? We have a request for information, RFI, on this nexus between smart manufacturing and energy management systems. I've referred, those who know me know that I call this the Reese's peanut butter equation. You've got your chocolate and your peanut butter together, they often taste better. So you've got energy management systems, which gives you your process and your people part, and you've got your technology, which could take a lot of the friction out of collecting data and analyzing data and things like that. So you bring them together and you end up with hopefully more sustainable savings, more savings, lower cost, et cetera, quicker, better, faster, cheaper. So if you have thoughts on that, let us know. And if you have know of a company that has an ISO 50001 certified facility, and you think that they've demonstrated leadership in the area of energy management, we are involved with the Clean Energy Ministerial. We're running a leadership recognition program with them, and we're hoping to announce the winners of this at the COP event in November in Glasgow, but that's TBD. But anyway, please send us please nominate those leaders in energy management that you look up to. And now I'm going to turn it over to Mike.
Thanks, Ethan. Thanks, everybody. just a few slides here quickly. Go ahead to the next slide. We all know about energy management and why it's important, so I'm going to go through this quickly. But this is a energy management continuum. You know, try to help people wherever they are and improve from there, from basics all the way up to superior energy performance. Next, please. And everything. This is just some samples of things made in North Carolina. And the point here is everything we make takes energy. Manufacturing is very energy intense. Next slide. Here's just some examples of transformation. Transformation takes energy. If you're going from a round bar to a fixed outer race half shaft front wheel drive bearing housing, that's a lot of energy to produce that. Melting cast iron to make cast iron pipe. There's a lot of energy to manage. This solar powered milk making machine is very often found in North Carolina. Next slide, please. Again, making more with less, you know, that's what it's all about. Making more bricks, more cookies, more steel, more whatever we're making, more plywood for less energy. And the good part is if you can reduce the energy, typically, not always, but most of the time, you're going to reduce the carbon footprint. Next, please. So what we really try to focus on when we do strategic energy management, typically using ISO 50001 and the 50001 Ready tool, we really focus on these two pie charts. What energy do we bring into the site, and then where does it go? The first pie chart's easy, energy bills, right? You know what you bought. Now, where does it all go? That's the harder one, but we have lots of tools from DOE and some we've developed ourselves, and we use and try to help people figure out what are my big significant energy users, and then we attack those. Next, please. So there's just a list of good reasons to use 50001 and 50001 Ready. It's great. I love it. I've used it dozens of times. I've never failed to see some people reduce their energy by using it. And it's a great program for people that may not want to be certified, or it's a great tool for people that do want to be certified to start. Next, please. Here's a couple of success stories of things we've seen with energy efficiency and beyond. Next slide, please. There's a lot of things, we talk a lot about beneficial electrification of processes to reduce carbon. Here's an example where we worked with a wood coating factory and reduced their process energy tremendously. Their efficiency went from 19% up to 65% efficient. There's some other numbers there. But yeah, production time was cut in half using infrared versus a fossil fueled oven. Lower emissions, lower maintenance, and lots of things like that. Next, please. Induction, replacing heat treat fossil fueled heating of parts to create carburization or surface hardening. This is a process where they went from just place all over the plant to single piece flow through a cell. And you can see the lean manufacturing items, lots of energy was saved, but lots of other non-energy benefits as well. Next, please. This is another case of infrared in a textile coating plant. This process implementation increased energy efficiency. We actually increased the amount of electricity consumed, but we reduced the total energy because of the reduction of the natural gas in the downstream oven after the infrared booster. And a very significant improvement, eliminated overtime, very good energy efficiency, much cleaner in terms of carbon. Next, please. Induction melting versus melting the cupola, which still uses coke, which is very high efficient or high density coal. Very dirty process, and this is much more efficient, much cleaner, lots of energy savings, labor savings, some safety, lower emissions, and other things like that. Next, please. Go ahead. Next slide. So what we've seen is through these projects and processes, there's lots of opportunity for reducing carbon, being more efficient, reducing fossil fuel consumption, beneficial electrification. But also this is not the country. This is just what we've seen with sites, the number of sites we've been working with, and the number of people over the last few years related directly to ISO 50001 projects. And you can see it was fairly flat or low early, and then around 2018, 2019, it just went crazy. And as I mentioned early, next slide, as I mentioned earlier, well, these are a lot of the people that were involved, and you can see a lot of government agencies, federal agencies, a lot of local military, worked a lot with Fort Bragg and other bases, the DOE, the labs, dozens and dozens of manufacturing plants. There's just so many stakeholders out there, utilities that want to participate in this as well, and lots of great programs. Next slide, please. And this is one of the things I mentioned in our discussion group earlier. We are seeing more and more people having goals to reduce carbon footprint is leading them to come to Advanced Energy and other people for strategic energy management consulting help. They're looking for a program to reduce their energy consumption or improve their energy efficiency because they have been given a goal or have their own goal to reduce carbon. And by the same token, in implementing strategic energy management will certainly help you reduce your carbon footprint. So these two go together just like peanut butter and chocolate in the Reese's cup, as Ethan mentioned. So 50,001 Ready provides a great pathway to both improving carbon footprint and at the same time improving energy management. And 50,001 Ready program, I believe, is working on implementing some carbon based tools and maybe even a task or something about carbon into the 50,001 Ready tool. Next, please. One thing, just mention this real quick, it was encouraging, buried deep in a House bill back last December 21st when everybody got a stimulus check, but there was an Energy Act of 2020 buried deep in those 4,000 pages. And in that Energy Act, there was one thing that said energy managers on federal facilities will consider 50,001 for their energy management system. So if you search 50,001 in 4,963 pages, you'll find it once, but it is law now that federal sites consider 50,001, and that will be updated in the CFR very soon. That's very encouraging. 9 out of 10 energy consultants recommend 50,001. Actually, there was no survey taken. This is just for fun, but it's very good. I love it. I use it all the time, and dozens of people have successfully reduced their energy and carbon using 50,001. Thank you.
Nice job, Michael Stowe. Thank you so much. And Ethan Rogers, outstanding information and updates for everyone about 50,001 Ready. It is, I think we were at break time. Right, Wendy?
Yes.
Yes.
We have wrapped up the where we are portion. So we know that we're like, the moral of this story is that we're advancing the tools that we already have, right? I've really enjoyed seeing kind of where 50,001 Ready has taken things from kind of honoring the cohort model, honoring the headquarters idea, and then also, you know, us trying to get a handle on the economic impact that SEM is having and basically the overall impact that SEM is having across North America in general. So hopefully everybody on this call will participate. Tell your friends, tell the friends of friends. Let's figure out what our impact is. And with that, we will take a 10-minute break. Come back at, let's see, 11:23 or 2:23. Did I get that right?
Yes.
That's some quick math right there. All right. See you guys soon.
All right.
All right. That's our cue to start.
That's a cue.
Enough chocolate talk.
Okay, so we're going to go to a Menti poll to re-energize us. And so let me pull this back up. Go to your web browser. And let me share the screen. Sorry. The question that should appear on your browser should be, what's been your favorite SEM Summit soundbite so far? I knew chocolate talk would be a top one, not a real poll. Walker's name. Yes, for sure. Walker's name. Walker's like a celebrity now. He says, if he wasn't before. Yeah, we were texting about this.
I think it's just going to be Lord of the Rings galore. That was like, that really came out of nowhere. Carbon drives SEM. Yes, that's a good one. Banana boats.
Yeah. Where were and maybe the apple bomb will appear. Oh, there's the apple bomb. Yeah. Solar powered milk machine. Very good. That was clever. I didn't get it at first, honestly, guys. You guys were all laughing at the solar powered milk machine. I was like, what? And now I'm there. That's me. Homemade marshmallows. Heck yeah. I'm going to be looking up how to do that. Walking
All
around
right,
with-
so I think what we're learning here is that Walker from now on has to have all the slides with Lord of the Rings, and we're just going to be talking about chocolate at the next SEM Summit. That's
For
basically
sure.
what we're learning here.
I'm surprised no one
Probably
said
get more attendance anyway.
Yeah, that's right. All chocolate all the time.
some more of what? Nice. This is great. Well, keep them coming in. We will get to our next topic. If that sounds good to you, Wendy.
Yes, that's perfect. All right. So one of the things that we were talking about is kind of where we've been and what we're learning. And one of the SEM call for, or during when we got from the call for topics, was a pretty interesting research paper that some people are working on. So I think Kim Crossman, you're taking the lead on this, but Kim and her team are going to be talking to us about SEM resiliency. Whew, it's been a year. Let's dig in, Kim.
Good. Hi, everyone. Is my sound okay? Quick check.
Oh, great.
Yes.
Great. Okay. Let's just charge right in forward. So this dog is the epitome of my year last year, and I think that's true for quite a few of us. I don't have to frame up what happened last year. You all know it, although some of you who are in other parts of the country may not have experienced the massive wildfires we had here. But Portland, Oregon was the most polluted city in the world for a couple of days last summer, worst air quality in the world. So it was like this. We were sitting here experiencing this locally. This whole paper came out of some dialogue that was going on all year last year within the Northwest SEM Collaborative, within the North American SEM Collaborative, about what we all were experiencing, and especially what people were experiencing out in the field. And it was very counterintuitive, these discussions, that in the midst of the chaos, it appeared that SEM programs were adjusting to the circumstances. Most were still meeting their energy savings goals, is what we were hearing, some even beyond that. And people were saying that the participants in SEM programs were responding and adjusting quickly to all of the internal and external changes involved in these massive disruptions. And it seemed like their SEM practices were fairly resilient. This seemed very counterintuitive to most of us on a sort of personal level, having actually lived through it. So kind of surprising. So we really wanted to get a better sense of what actually happened from the participants' perspective. We've been talking to each other a lot. I want to give one tiny bit of context. There was a 3-day, oh, let's advance, and I can give the context on the next slide. There was a 3-day action session last fall at a Northwest SEM Collaborative meeting on the topic of SEM and resilience. And out of that conversation, the idea for this research came directly out of it. You know, we do a lot of action planning in these collaboratives, and sometimes there's not a clear path forward to how you actually do the work that you've planned. In this case, it really looked like a self-organizing system for random members of the Northwest SEM Collaborative, who were, 3 of us were in these sessions, got together and just did the project. So I'm throwing that out there in a nod to Walt Tennyson and the comment he made about how collaborative work is shared work. It's work we kind of self-organize around, and we appreciate the leadership for helping us do that, but it's all about us all jumping in. So Kathleen Balkhayat from Energy Trust of Oregon, Dave Hall from Energy 350, and Kel Van Zoon from Energy 350 are all gonna speak with you today, and then we'll all lead some breakout groups. Please go ahead. So the question that we were working with at the core in thinking about what we'd heard from everyone is SEM making these businesses more resilient? You know, that was the And, you know, the hypothesis that I hold and that others are testing is that practicing SEM improves an organization's ability to effectively respond to and adjust to both planned and unexpected changes in day-to-day business operations. The reason why this matters is that we are approaching, every indication is that we are approaching an unprecedented time of greater and greater disruption going forward, whether we're talking about the impacts of climate change or some of the other side effects associated with those impacts, or other giant global economic and political forces that cause chaos in markets and in businesses and in people's lives. And there is a real risk in my mind that as the impacts of climate change ramp up, that the attention to mitigation of greenhouse gases that many of us have been focused on for 30 plus years, and the funding associated with that will all get sucked out of the system and be redirected to dealing with the crises on a public level. And to me, this feels like a real risk that as things get much worse, we won't have the luxury of focusing on this long-term transformation, but we absolutely have to do this work. That's it. There is no other future path forward than us continuing. So the basic idea here is that optimized and flexible approaches to energy management, which really operate well in this disrupted, dynamic, and frankly, weird environment over the next 10 to 20 years, will be more successful. They will actually work. And so this is one of these beyond energy savings benefits of SEM that we're trying to get to and we're trying to get better at in order to be prepared for that future. Please go ahead. So, well, this looks ugly, sorry. The objectives of the research, thank you, Chad, is we were just going to survey the program participants about what happened to them. We wanted to characterize how SEM may have affected what they experienced during this time. We were also hoping to identify whether there were elements or aspects of SEM delivery that were particularly helpful during the chaos and disruption. And we wanted to identify if there were any elements of the current SEM programs or practices that were brittle or would break or cause people problems when the crises hit. So I'm calling them crises now. When we talk to the end users, we call them challenges, disruptions. This is all on a scale, right, of how it affects you. We wanted to make sure that everyone here knows that this is a limited research, non-random sample, lack of a control group, and it relies on participants self-reporting of their experience. So, you know, we can look at this data and we can play with it and we can think about what it means. And we're going to do that today. But, you know, normal caveats apply to whether this actually tells us the answers to our questions or not. It's indicating them. So please go ahead. In order to get this survey out to participants, we reached out through the North American SEM Collaborative and then directly with the SEM program implementers that we know best, I think. You know, these names here are very familiar to many on this call, I'm sure. We did put out the general call to all, and these folks responded and said yes, they would send out the survey to their participants. We thank them so much for that. It definitely was the backbone of us being able to do this project quickly, simply, and sort of almost more in a lean way. So thank you. Please move ahead. So just a quick update on where we are. I mean, this just happened. The data you're looking at today is very, very recent. We did the survey in June. We had 91 respondents. We're going to discuss some of the preliminary results today. We tried to pick out the most interesting bits, but about half of the questions are not coming up today, and we will later on pull together documentation and findings and make them available to everyone. We'll figure out how that is done probably. Program administrators who participated are going to receive the full data set of responses from their participants. And then we also wanted to offer you all, if anybody is interested in this, thinks they could take it further than our little volunteer team did, right, in our quick effort, or wants to play around with it, just reach out and we will be happy to make the data set available to anyone who wants it for further analysis. We'll strip out the identifying information for the program administrators or any names which aren't really in there anyway, and you can have at it. We would love to crowdsource, you know, next stage work on this. So open source data, please go ahead. So Chad, it's our time. So the context of this question, just briefly, I wanted to say is we asked this question to participants. So you're to guess which one of these the participants, most of them selected most frequently.
Great. So thanks, Kim. And this is so fascinating, this research. Please, if you have for some reason closed your web browser or you've joined us since our last polls, go to menti.com, type in the numbers here that are appearing at the top of your screen, 8151963, and answer the question. Which of these was most frequently selected as an SEM benefit in this time of disruption? What are your thoughts?
Great about this is that I get a feeling we're going to get to see how far off or how close we were. And it's kind of a good sign, right? Or a good kind of pulse of how well do we know our participants right now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so great. It's, and to your point, Wendy, and many, again, they've been doing this for a long time. I remember Ross Lancaster and I talking about this like 12 years ago. Like the idea that if your energy champion couldn't, at a last minute, couldn't make it to the energy team meeting, would the energy team still meet? Like the regularly scheduled meeting. It's like as an indicator of, okay, this is more than just one personality. This is more about process. This is a more resilient thing going on. And I love that. And I love how this is how Kim and Kathleen and Dave and Kel are asking this question, really kind of probing this next layer. Now we know so much more about the changes that are upon us in every organization and so on. Any surprises, Kim, or things you're seeing here that are?
Well, we're going to show the slide that actually show the data that actually answers this question in a little bit. I would ask everyone to remember what they picked. Okay. And if we could give prizes, we would. It's hard to do any of that remotely.
Jars of peanut butter.
So, I would say that what you should know now that you've already voted is that the answer was not intuitive.
Oh, I knew that was going to happen.
Oh, yeah.
It's not cost reduction. We always think everything's about cost, but I don't think, all right.
I'm with you. I love that one. It's great. Okay, I love the twists. Okay, let's go back to the slides then. Preliminary results.
I am going to hand it over to Kathleen to take us through the next set.
Thanks, Kim. Hi, everyone. I'm Kathleen Belkayet, Energy Trust. So I'm going to be talking about kind of introducing our preliminary results. And I'm going to start with some kind of framing and context for who responded. Go to the next slide. So our first question was to get a sense of kind of the split between commercial and industrial and agricultural customers. So out of the 91 respondents, about 40% were commercial or institutional customers, and the remaining 60% or so were industrial, manufacturing, or agriculture. Next slide. We also asked how many years their organization has been in SEM. So a few didn't know, majority under 2 years. We also saw folks in the 2 to 4 year range, just under 30%, and then 5 years or more, well over 20%. Next slide.
Ooh.
All right, so
I'll fix that.
So in terms of what we asked customers or participants what they thought were the most disruptive, or which disruptions impacted their business operations. So we actually gave them the opportunity to select more than one, and many selected multiple of this multiple choice. And so no surprise, a majority of folks said the pandemic was a disruption to their business, 92%. And additionally, as Kim showed the participants, many of them were West Coast programs. So we did see wildfires impacting a large group of folks, as well as supply chain disruption, about 45%, significant change in demand for a service or product, and economic recession. So it's all contributed to many of the participants' disruptions in 2020. Next slide. Then we asked about, more specifically, their energy team. What did their energy team face in 2020? So a long list of multiple choice options for them to select, and had the option to select multiple. And we group to group them and kind of get a better sense here. About 70% of the respondents said that virtual platforms or working from home was a challenge. Almost half of the participants said staff engagement or leadership focus was a challenge in 2020. And then additionally, layoffs, reduced hours, as well as building schedules and access to information were common responses. So there really was kind of a spread between the human elements and the more technical elements of SEM. Next slide. And this shows quite a spread between kind of where businesses are at in terms of being back to normal. Whether, you know, there ever is a normal or a new normal for folks. But so most of them said mostly, but as you can see, you kind of got a spread between yeses, partially, and not yet as well. So this chart here, so we asked participants in a variety of SEM components, whether they did more or less or about the same, and kind of on the scale that's identified here at the bottom, on these SEM elements or these SEM components as compared to the previous year. So as compared to 2019, somewhat normal year, did they do more or less or about the same of the different elements? And so we actually organized this chart. So the elements that were actually done less are at the top here, and the ones that had more activity or more respondents that had done more of those activities fall to the bottom here. And what's interesting here is that the organizational elements float to the top here, whereas the technical elements float to the bottom. So organizational SEM engagement and energy team meetings, folks were saying that there was less time for that, or they were putting less effort into those areas of SEM. Whereas energy project implementation, identifying new savings opportunities were done more by more participants. And what's interesting here is you look at the energy monitoring, that yellow bar there, doing about the same level of work, is the biggest yellow bar here. And if you look at you know, the yellow, the blue, and the green combined, that's a really large percentage of folks that said they did their energy monitoring, if not the same, more, or that it was more helpful, or they used it more in 2020, which you know, points to whether the accuracy of savings is enough for us as implementers or evaluators. It really is still important it seems to be important for participants to really continue tracking, and that those tools are still pretty valuable for participants. Okay, so this slide, we looked at both what tools were particularly helpful, tools or practices that were particularly helpful for participants during this time in 2020, as well as tools or practices that failed or were less helpful for participants. So the top chart, and just something to note is that this was an open-ended question, and so there were folks that didn't answer the question or said yes or no to the question. And then we did group and kind of try to categorize the qualitative answer in order to kind of get a sense of what trends or kind of common answers that we saw here. And so for the helpful tools, coaching support was the biggest response. And also there were multiple responses for O&M and behavioral opportunities, as well as the trainings, workshops, or meetings. We kind of grouped responses that had anything related to training in that category. And then for the failed tools and practices, the majority of folks that responded said employee engagement was a challenge. And then also to note that indoor air quality was mentioned by a few folks. On to Dave.
Thanks, Kathleen. Yeah, I get the question with the big reveal. So Dave Hall with Energy 350, and I think I'm going to move pretty quickly here so we stay more or less on schedule. But this is the question that we asked you in the Menti poll, and this is the set of responses that we got from participants. And you can see the top response here is the framework for energy team training. So congratulations, I think 7 or 8 of you that selected that one. Well done. And just a quick note too, in terms of what you're seeing on the right-hand side is the kind of rank ordering. Those are the number of responses on the right, and then it's the percentage in that the top responses in the bullets to the left. So what we see here, the framework for energy team training being the highest, opportunities for staff connection also being right up there. And then, so those are, clearly more about the kind of the human connection, human elements of SEM. And then the other top 3 responses there start to get into some other elements, so like the deferred maintenance projects and complete invasive projects during low occupancy kind of shows that it was a unique time that more folks were able to maybe do some kind of project work that they might not have been able to do otherwise under more normal circumstances. But then also there's that other human piece of like the community connections, relationships with other organizations, which really speaks to the value that about 1/3 of the participants said was like really significant for them by being a part of a cohort and going through this SEM journey. I know we tried to emphasize that, like, thanks for being in this with us, like, thanks for sticking with us. And there was a lot of bonding in our cohorts and our delivery around the fact that we were kind of doing SEM and going through a pandemic together. So next slide, please. And then this question really starts to get at the core of the hypothesis that Kim laid out at the front here. So participation in SEM has helped us proactively prepare for and effectively support implementation of planned changes in business operations. And you can see a really strong set of agreement overall through the responses, with a very small number of folks disagreeing with that statement, and a decent number of folks, 20%, saying they're neutral. But very favorable spread there, with a straight up agree being the modal response. So giving some kind of support for this idea that SEM, as a framework, helps an organization with implementation of plan changes. Like, that's really what it's about too, like being intentional, being planned, and implementing things towards predetermined priorities and goals. So next slide, please. And then this is the other part of that hypothesis of SEM helping to increase capacity to effectively adapt and respond to unexpected changes in business operations. Here we see a little bit of a shift towards, a few more folks saying disagree, but still a very favorable response on the agree side of those, with more folks in the neutral category. I know personally this set of responses surprised me how strong and how many folks did agree with that statement, basically saying, yeah, it helped us with our business operations in regards to these unexpected changes. So very encouraging response there. I think this is also worth reiterating too, the bias of the sample themselves. These are going to be self-respondents, probably getting more responses from people that are more engaged with SEM, experiencing more value out of it. But still, this is going to show that a lot of folks are getting a lot of value, and it's helping them not just with like kind of the intentional changes, but also adapting to the unexpected changes that they're experiencing. The next slide. So here we have it, just a quick breakout. So yeah, same question, but broken out by years in SEM. So we were curious if maybe those that had been in SEM longer maybe found that they understood the value of it, they had more mature programs, maybe was helping them to a greater degree. And we do see a bit of a shift towards more agreement with this statement. Nobody that was in it 5 years more disagreed with the statement. They were at least neutral or fully in the agreement category. So see definitely a little bit of that trend, especially like also the middle one, 2 to 4 years, that shift and more agreement in that with that statement. And the next slide, same question about the unexpected changes. And again, we see a bit of a shift in favor of the more people are in SEM, the more there's agreement with this statement. But there's still some disagreement. So maybe some people that are in SEM longer kind of know what it can do for them and know what it can't do for them at this point. So if you're interested in diving into those a little bit more, Keel's going to tell us here about our interactive sessions and how we're going to be digging in on this and getting your perspective on these findings.
Actually, I think that we have a couple of minutes. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Cal, but we're running a little bit ahead, and Wendy and I thought we might address a couple of the questions in the chat first before we break for interactive session. Does that work for you?
Sure.
Okay, great. Thank you. Wendy, do you want to facilitate this, or should I just open up a couple of chat questions and we can talk about a few of them?
I know one question that came up from Emma Johnson at Seattle City Light that some folks have seconded, if you will, was to say a bit more about what the framework for energy team training is.
Yeah, I like that question. I mean, what you're looking at in all of these labels is exactly the amount of information the participants saw, right? We didn't give them any details on what a framework for energy team training means, except to say either in-house or remote or virtual, right? So it was part of a long list of which of the following benefits did SEM provide during this period of disruption and in recovery. And I think that we were surprised. I was definitely surprised to see that be the top answer, which, by the way, is back to our Mentimeter question. To me, what I mean when I say a framework for training is just some kind of a structure that they are being brought in the context of these programs, curriculum, tools, and a clear path to proceed that helps them move forward and get better at energy management. It's that open. But I also assumed when I saw that this might be good news to people creating things like 50,001 Ready or other frameworks for adopting energy management. I think a lot of us who've been involved with the SEM resource programs are operating kind of similar frameworks in terms of what are the basic learnings, and that gets us back to the SEM minimum elements, right? So the SEM minimum elements is an example. It actually doesn't give you a framework. It's more of definitions, but we've all built out our frameworks underneath that.
And maybe one last question, Kim, might be, there was a lot of comments, at least beginning, like around turnover. It sounds like implementers and program administrators were experiencing a lot of issues with turnover and hearing that from their participants. But was that anything that was looked at in this?
It showed up in the impacts question. What impacts have you experienced? But I don't believe it was a top answer, which is surprising, but it also showed up in a number of different ways. You had things like staffing shortages was one of the answers, turnover was another, and I think there was even a third or fourth that pertained to rapid staffing problems. And in fact, I think that we could easily say, and please correct me, one of my team members here, that it appears that the hardest parts of SEM to sustain during this disruption were the human elements, as Kathleen said, that humans were what was most affected by these disruptions. And therefore, the human parts of SEM that most of us are so committed to and love so deeply were the most challenged.
Great. All right. Should we get into some breakout groups for 10 or 15 minutes?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, so the idea, I'm gonna chat into the chat here, the mural boards that we've created. So we've created 4 mural boards, one for each breakout, and it has the names there of the people who are leading the breakouts. And the idea here is that we want to dig a little more deeper into some of these questions that we asked the participants. We'll have some of the data that they provided from our research in the breakout sessions on the mural boards, and then just get your perspectives on it. What do you think about it? Any ideas? Is something about this that really stood out to you? Anything cool you want to discuss with the group in the breakout session? So the four that we have here are those 4 questions here. In the interest of time, I would say just take a quick moment to read through these and see which breakout you want to join. And then we can open up the rooms and have people go into whichever room they want. So again, there's 4 breakout sessions. These are the 4 questions we'll be answering, or sorry, talking about during these breakouts. And me, Dave, Kim, and Kathleen are all going to be running one of those breakout sessions. So I'll be doing breakout 1, Kathleen's doing breakout 2, Dave's doing breakout 3, and Kim's doing breakout 4. And they'll remind you of the boards once we're in there as well. So if you want to get started, feel free to click any of those links now in the chat.
Just talking sunglasses.
That was bright. That was bright.
Was that bright?
That was good stuff.
Yeah, I am sure that the feedback is going to be, there wasn't enough time in the breakout room.
It was. And poor Kim, she was like mid-sentence.
Oh.
Yeah.
So sorry.
Was it?
I just popped something in the chat. I don't know if Kim's joined us yet, but to give us her final 2 thoughts, because I'm on the edge of my seat. I want to know.
Oh, it was a good one. Take us home, Kim, before the break. Take us home.
Can I say it? The 2 words I said was, we barely scratched the surface of these big strategic questions, and I hope people will engage with them more deeply. Number 1, how can we make our programs better at this, at being changing, growing, flexible things that actually can support a flexible, strange future. And I can't remember what my other point was. Sorry.
No worries.
I'll chime in and add that, again, thanks for everybody that helped us to collect this data. And we do want to make this data available to all the data nerds out there that are interested in diving in more. So if you're interested, contact Kim, and she's happy to provide that for you. We'll be stripping out any of the like unique identifier information and like that, but happy to make this data set publicly available.
And this could always spark, like, from an SEM collaborative standpoint, if people are more interested in this type of stuff, let's continue this conversation. Let's move it forward. Let's take it bigger. That's what we're here to do, is to help facilitate that. So thanks so much, you guys, for bringing this to us. I think we learned a lot today in this specific section. We are going to take a 5-minute break, especially for those on the West Coast that need to get some food, grab a banana, get your sandwich, whatever it is that you have prepared. We'll come back at 2:20. And we are going to wrap up with kind of a fun debate about where we're headed. So, all right, come back at 12:20.
Yeah.
All right, let's get started. We have a Menti question, and then we will wrap up with where we are headed. And we'll see you guys tomorrow. So, Chad, you want to take us to the Mentimeter?
Menti.com. If your browser did not refresh, then go Menti.com, type in the code 8151963, and type in what was the coolest thing in the SEM resiliency session. There are many cool things, I thought. I'm like, you didn't say it directly, by the way. I'll just say, I'm curious, like almost like a crisis makes things more valuable. Remember, like 2 years ago, I had like a couple of team members in my team like, yeah, Chad, resilience, it's really important. I'm like, yeah, whatever, and then COVID hits, and now I'm like, resilience, it's like all I talk about. And so, yeah, it's interesting how crisis can really underscore the value of certain things like resilience.
Yeah, I'm seeing here, it's interesting, like we're kind of reaffirming, right, that coaching matters.
Yeah.
That's kind of nice to see, right? As a coach, you always think you matter, but then you don't know if you really do. And I think what we heard is that we do. I also think it's awesome that a lot of people are saying the mural was cool, right? The use of the murals. So sometimes it's not about the content, it's about the tools. which is a good lesson for SEM as well. The mural was a fun thing to learn how to do.
Platforms are important.
Chad sunglasses, always great.
I felt that the feedback too is setting up check-ins and stuff. We're not nagging. They actually appreciate it. You know, so
Keeping people on task.
Right. That's one of the hard things of a coach. No.
I used to always say I walk a fine line between tenacious and annoying as an SEM coach. I'm going to be tenacious up until the point of annoying, and then I'm going to back off.
I call it professional pestering.
Yes, that's a good one too. I love it.
I am a professional pest.
I was
going to say it sounds a lot like being a mom.
Yeah, one of my co-coaches used to say that. She's like, I've been training for 18 years for this. All right, that's great. Awesome, guys. Thanks. Well, if you need or want to learn more or just dig into the data, you guys know where to find it. You can contact one of the team members that presented. Thanks so much, guys. This was great. So the next and final thing that we are going to do, I'm excited to see what they came up with because I haven't seen it yet, but Richard Hart, for his call for topic, he said, I'd like to do a debate. And he said, I'd like to do a debate about whether or not SEM curriculum and cohorts are still a thing post-pandemic. And I thought, oh, that's going to be great after Kim's presentation with her team. So Richard Hart, I will let you go. I'm not too sure exactly where you landed with this, but excited to see.
Thank you, Wendy. Where I landed is somewhere between wondering whether volunteering a question is a good thing or a bad thing, because it inevitably lands you in the position I'm in right now. So anyway, thank you for this time. The question here is inherently provocative, and we wanted to get people to start thinking not just about curriculum actually, but also about how curriculum is delivered. Curriculum means different things to different people. What we definitely heard in the past session was around flexibility and responsiveness. And so if we are asking our participants to be resilient in the face of challenge, the question is, are our programs resilient in the face of challenge? So we're going to be looking at curriculum and cohorts here. We want to spur some thinking, and we've got a panel here. So the panel is, I'm not really on the panel. It's going to be Lizzie Belmont and Mike Koch from Cascade. And we also have Peter Bassett from EPS. I don't know if there's a way of foregrounding us in this or what, but we're going to remove the slide in a second. Go to a Menti quiz. We'll then do a panel discussion, and then we'll come back to the Menti quiz. And I've just been told that the battery on my headset is low, so I'm going to switch to a different way of talking here while you do your quiz.
Great. Thanks, Richard. So the question has come up. And again, if your browser has not refreshed, you closed it for some random reason, or you just joined us for the first time here today, please go to menti.com, type in the code you can see at the top of the screen, 8151963, and answer this question. How happy are you with your program's SEM curriculum and its delivery in the cohort setting? There are a few responses at the bottom. Makes it just right. Love the curriculum as delivered. Second one, we're on the right track, but I'd like to make some tweaks. And lastly, it's time for change. I'm rethinking my assumptions.
I like the bold 7 in the change. They're just, or 10. That's getting up now. I'm like, wholesale change. Interesting. Yeah. It'd be interesting to know, or maybe we'll find out, who knows, if this is because of the pandemic or just because it's stagnant or what?
Yeah, great.
I think the tweaks I'm thinking about are pandemic based.
Interesting. So yeah, tweaks based on pandemic. Yeah, I mean, virtual, right? That was a huge wholesale shift for a lot of people. You know, this time next year, maybe I'll be doing this in person.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be lovely?
You know, what's funny is it was really cool to see how almost everyone embraced virtual meetings and virtual things now. And now, though, I mean, how fast people are kind of going, you know, if there's an option, they don't want to go virtual right now. It seems like they've had it with virtual. We're done, but we'll see. We'll see.
All right. Well, thanks very much for the voting. I've got a lot of people in that middle category of the right track. So that I think is really really interesting. And let's see what we're going to go through a little discussion here. Maybe we'll have some chat afterwards. We're going to repose the question and see if anybody changes their mind as a result of our discussion as we go forward. So Chad, I think you can drop the curriculum, drop this here, and we can let's just kind of make sure we're on the right page here. So many people have seen something like this slide. I'm assuming you can hear me, by the way. I changed my audio, so it's okay. Great. Okay. So many people have seen something like this slide. It's a 13-month curriculum. There's a bunch of workshops in those colored blocks, and then there are site activities, which are those lines. And many programs have an order, a sequence in which things need to be delivered, and each one of those blocks represents a workshop. And some of the challenges we faced as Richard was just talking about is the switch to virtual. And once you've done that switch to virtual, that means that people are no longer in the room. And, if we think about if this meeting right now that we're in were in person, the degree of interaction between everybody would be significantly different from how it is right now. And we've definitely seen that in delivery. And we might actually, despite people's love of personal interaction, we might see actually a significantly large number of programs continue to be delivered with a large virtual component to them, because it's convenient for people and because it may reduce cost and it may reduce travel time and so on and so forth. So that's something that we're looking at. And so if we've got different interactions between people and we're not necessarily seeing workshops coming together in quite the same way as they came together before, does that mean that the concept of the workshop is not so useful? Does it mean that the concept of even getting people into a cohort is not that useful? So we wanted to dig in on this, and we thought, okay, let's do a little sort of treasure hunt activity here. Let's look into this. Let's assume that if we're asking our participants to be flexible, to embrace change, that means that we ourselves as implementers, program administrators, people designing and reviewing and evaluating these programs, we also need to embrace a certain level of flexibility. So let's maybe drop the screen here, Chad, if we can. And I'm going to turn first. So as I mentioned, our panel today, it's Peter Bassett of EPS Energy. And then I'm joined by my colleagues, Lizzie Belmont and Mike Koch of Cascade. So Peter, I'm going to turn to you first, in your thinking of how programs need to be responsive. What do you think about this question of cohorts and delivery of that use for delivery of curriculum?
Yeah, so I guess my perspective, I came into SEM probably about 4 years ago, but coming out of 35 years of energy efficiency, trying to make it happen. And so for me, the curriculum is a good structure. We've tended to evolve to one-on-one delivery. We do workshops that are 2 hours, 1 to 2 hour long. We get 4 or 5 participants from a particular organization in the same workshop. And we meet them every week. So I think there are as many models for how to engage organizations to evolve energy management in the marketplace, as there's probably people on this call. And I think when we look at the challenges we face with carbon, with the crisis on the planet, we need to think of this as a continuous evolutionary process. We're advocating continuous improvement systems. So I really am not married to anything here. I think there's a lot of fullness in the curriculum, but I do think continuous adaptation, evolving the service model, and continuing to push boundaries is the way we as an industry need to be thinking about this.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much, Peter. Appreciate that. Mike, what do you think about what Peter just said?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. One particular area I've been reflecting on a lot this last year is workshops, particularly with this big switch to going to virtual from in person. I think one of the key issues with the workshop format that we run into is just getting the right people there. And virtual delivery, while it really lowered the barrier to entry to attending those, it seems like it also lowers the barrier to exiting or not engaging fully. So it's pretty easy to check emails, take calls, deal with issues at the plant. And so checking out and being engaged, being less engaged, seemed to become kind of a newer issue. There was ways that we dealt with that with breakout rooms, but it still seems like we struggle with having all the right people in the workshop. And Peter mentioned one-on-one delivery. I think there's a lot of content that could be delivered in that way that would meet the customer where they're at on their timeline, ensuring like the key folks are available. And so that's something that I'm pretty curious about. It seems like it's working in some areas. And I don't want to sound like I'm proposing to ditch the cohort. I think there's a lot of really key parts of the cohort model around like networking and idea sharing that make it really valuable. But if we're having a workshop and we don't have the right person there, and then it all has to be reconveyed to the site anyways, it just makes me wonder if there's some sort of iteration we can do on how we deliver.
Yeah. Lizzie, I think you may have had another perspective on workshops that been your experience.
Yeah, so I'm lucky enough to work with quite a few cohorts that are essentially water and wastewater municipal participants. And I've really noticed that for those sorts of end users, especially the cohort model, the workshop model, the kind of collaboration and idea sharing works exceptionally well, especially with these municipal end users, who don't have the same kind of competition as maybe like a big industrial site might. They're able to share ideas, and they have kind of more of like a shared language, shared experience that they're able to build upon when it comes to saving energy and using their SEM practices. And so I think that the workshops with the curriculum that we use with these kind of standard water and wastewater cohorts, we get to really dive into the technical and then get to see exactly how that technical applies to each one of the sites. And oftentimes, like, we'll go off on tangents in the workshops where a couple people will be talking about a specific subsystem, and they'll get down to a really nitty-gritty level that if we didn't have a workshop, they just wouldn't have the ability to be able to discuss. So I think that really one of the things that, and as Peter and Mike and I have been kind of discussing this, prepping for today, we've really talked about a lot is knowing your end users and figuring out what sort of format is going to be the best for them, because it could be a wide variety of things.
That's a good point. Chad, could you reshare that slide with the curriculum for a second? So, Peter, when we sort of were preparing for this, we were talking about whether you want to do things in certain orders, and then Lizzie's just talking about getting some technical stuff on the board is great, but then we also heard that engaging employees, for example, can be more or less challenging depending on circumstance. You seem to have a fairly kind of strong reaction to this when we first started talking about curriculum. What do you take from this?
Well, I think I pick up on Lizzie's point, which is know your participants, right? And the whole principle here is that we need to be in touch with our participants, be adaptive. So, for example, when we're delivering SEM, we might jump to stage 4 if it's a particularly appropriate thing for a particular participant. And because we're doing individual, that's just the nature of how we're doing it. Not to say it's any better than the cohorts. It's, I think, treating this as a good list of elements, but not being wedded to it has to be, you know, this first and that second and that third, but rather somewhat being adaptive and innovative in kind of customizing to particular participants where their need may be to help accelerate, you know, and to be, I guess, just responsive to where their needs are. So that's all I think I was trying to say yesterday, Richard, is I think, you know, being wedded to this as a sequential process, I'm not necessarily a fan of that. But I do think it's a great structure of elements to work within.
So picking up on what Peter was saying, Mike, you've been talking about, you know, breakout rooms being a potential way to get people engaged in activities, you know, and potentially the ultimate breakout room is where Peter has ended up, which is actually one-on-one delivery, where you're actually not really having people in the same room, you know, real or virtual. And you said you're interested in that. Can you say more?
Yeah, I think part of it is a logistics thing of, you know, when we're diving deep into these topics in a workshop and it's one-on-one, the challenge is being able to line up people to work with them on that specific topic. And if it's done more in a one-on-one setting, you can really meet them where they're at with the right people on both sides, not just their team, but also on the SEM coaching team. And I think there's some advantages is that it helps reduce rework later. It would help reduce the workshop length, which, you know, 2, 3, 4 hours is a pretty big time commitment. And I think a lot of sites really, they really struggle with that. You know, it would be a bit of a deviation from the current curriculum, but it's really the curriculum format and not as much the content. And, you know, depending on the program, that can be a pretty big jump to make that change. But from what Peter's saying, you know, they do a lot more one-on-one delivery that's really flexible. That approach seems pretty interesting to me. And I guess I would have a curiosity around, in that format, is there any networking between sites, or is it really just, you know, pure one-on-one, or is there a way for any sort of peer-to-peer interaction happening?
So just to answer that, Mike, we have also brought that into place. So we'd be working with like 10 plants in an area and individually, but then at moments we'll bring them together for exchanges, you know. So I think it's back to the concept of evolutionary, right? There's some good stuff about the cohort concept of letting people interact. And there's probably some good stuff on one-on-one coaching and, you know, customization. But yeah, I do think there's tremendous value in the cohort sharing also. So we wouldn't want to throw that off the bus and make it either or, you know.
And I think one other thing that has to be added in about the kind of system that that we have the slide up for right now is the fact that it's pretty easily scalable. You know, it has a set of kind of standard curriculum, a set of standard meetings, a set of standard things to go around with it. So, you know, it's theoretically easy to teach new practitioners, easy to translate to a lot of different end users. And also because of the group meetings is theoretically, you know, more cost effective than a one-on-one delivery might be. So I think that's also something I think is important to throw out there when kind of considering what sort of implementation is the best for any area.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point, right? So standardization can lead to lower cost delivery potentially. So Peter, how would you, or Mike, if you've been thinking about sort of the one-on-one piece, how would you address that question of maybe the customization per participant could actually just make this really not scalable and quite costly?
Well, I know our programs have been cost effective or are cost effective. So, you know, it's not been a problem so far in that regard. But I would say we are working with some very large facilities. So there, you know, the ratio between the effort and the savings is quite respectable. We're also working with a lot of small plants in some parts of the continent as well. And we've been able to keep the cost effectiveness in line. So I think you can adapt the individual interaction and keep it within cost effective boundaries. But it's back to, I don't think it's either or. You know, I think it's a question of continuous evolution and figuring out how to make this model, you know, relevant to the end users. First of all, produce the kinds of savings relative to the cost that's required by the utilities and the industry. And so we haven't found that as a particular barrier yet.
Yeah, and my comment on that, I've only done one-on-one with a couple sites, but it was, I mean, it's using standardized curriculum, and those training sessions are significantly shorter than, say, like a 3 or 4 or 5 hour workshop. So it seems like it can scale, but again, my experience is pretty limited in that respect. It's probably, I guess my initial thought is that if, you know, not everyone makes it to the workshop and there has to be some follow-up later, there's probably becomes a bit of a wash in terms of costs if you're putting more time in later.
Well, that's true. Okay. Yeah. So you kind of have to do, and might end up doing one-on-one anyway, because of the challenge of getting the right person or the right people into the that workshop. That's a good point. I think one of the other things that I want us to just talk about here for a second is something that seems to be important for the collaborative here, which is the ability to kind of compare one program to another, and having some question of some standard approaches to delivery means that the individual smaller tweaks between programs can allow for some interesting research about which programs are doing the right thing and which or what we can all learn from each other. Whereas kind of highly customizable approaches per site with maybe no cohort interactions or limited means it's a more difficult research project. I wonder if any of you have a comment on that comparability question.
I mean, my comment is it's about scaling up the savings as fast and big as we can, right? Back to the climate crisis. So whatever gets us there, I think that's first and foremost, you know, keeping the purpose of what we're trying to do in view. So I think that's our first consideration, and comparability is sort of a secondary issue in my mind.
Okay, Wendy's given us the 5-minute warning here. So thank you. It'd be a big flashing red card if we were in person, I guess. So thanks very much. I'm just thinking about going forward. We haven't really, the carbon issue has also come up in the chat here. Any comments on sort of thinking forward about how attempts by programs to reduce the carbon footprint of delivery would impact choosing any one way of delivery over another? Maybe start with you, Lizzie.
Yeah, I think I have been only sort of following the chat, but I think Pam made a comment earlier about, you know, if our goal is to, you know, save as much energy and, you know, reduce as much carbon use as possible, then really we should be doing whatever it takes to get those gains. And I kind of tend to agree with Pam there. So I think just a second on that. And then, of course, we should be paying attention to the impacts of our individual actions, whether it's, you know, flying to a workshop, driving to a workshop, you know, but if we're being able to, you know, save a large percentage of a site's kilowatt hours because of that, then that could potentially be totally worth it.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to just ask you each maybe one question here, which is, when we come out of a typical treasure hunt, we've investigated opportunities for improvement at the site, and we try and find some high value, low-ish cost things to do. We happen to use the word gems for that at Cascade, but I mean, lots of people have a different way of a different terminology. Is there any particular thing that you would recommend that that this group look at? And then we'll just jump to the quiz in a minute. Chad, repeat the quiz and see if anyone's got any different opinions. Any sort of gems, any high value, reasonably low impact changes that you want to make on our journey going forward? I'll start with you, Mike.
I guess I would push for us to keep considering the different merits of one-on-one versus cohorts, and not going one way or the other, but comparing and contrasting where they make the most sense to deliver the most valuable value for our customers and get that energy savings.
Thank you. Peter?
I think we need to bring the use of data more explicitly into the structure. We're moving into, smart manufacturing industry 4.0 world here. The equipment has data systems around it, using data to treasure hunt, integrating data into more explicitly the SEM model. I think is going to happen, and we really need to stay ahead of that.
Very good. Okay. And then Lizzie, you've got the final word here.
I think one of the things that a virtual engagement kind of encouraged me to start doing that I would love to continue doing throughout whatever sort of SEM curriculum and delivery we have is to find more ways for participants to teach each other and teach themselves. So I think that A, reduces the work for setup theoretically, and B, hammers the points home in a much more impactful way. So that would be my gem to share.
Great, thank you. Well, I hope this has provoked some thinking on this topic, and we really appreciate the opportunity to kind of get this in front of you and have some discussion on how we believe SEM should be delivered. We had a quiz at the beginning, and Chad, if you wouldn't mind putting that quiz back up, and we can see if anyone has changed their mind as a result of our conversation.
Okay, same question, actually same Mentimeter platform, same everything else, same question now with fresh perspectives from the fascinating discussion and great questions from all of you. So let's see how this evolves.
Feels about the same.
Yeah, pretty close.
About the same, about the same. Maybe we swayed one or two people one way or the other.
I think one person in the left went to the middle. And I know who you are. I'm just kidding. I have no idea.
There are more on the right hand side though.
Mm-hmm.
Did anyone from the middle leave?
Don't say who you are. I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would appear so. It would appear so. This is great and excellent. I want to emphasize something we talked about when we were getting Wendy and Greg were saying at the beginning. We definitely crowdsourced this whole topic. We love debate, interesting stuff. I've known Richard Hart for a long time, and anytime he proposes talking about anything, I'm always game. And definitely the Cascade team has got a lot of smart folks. Of course, joined by Peter Bassett in this case. So excellent topics and discussions. So thank you all for your participation. We are wrapping up, and we have one final Mentimeter question for you. We'll have a full survey tomorrow to ask for your feedback about the SEM Summit. But today, just one question. What can we do better tomorrow?
Yeah, and why people are feeling that out. I had this thought while I was listening to that debate, and it's this idea around community engagement. So at Energy Trust of Oregon, we're really digging into community engagement, what it means, and what it means to innovate and design. And through that process, we've really put the customer or the stakeholder or the community first. And I had an aha moment when I was listening to the debate, and that was from Kim's and Kathleen and Dave and Kiel's session, which basically said at the beginning, remember, everybody thought it was about cost reduction. And what the participants said is, no, it's about energy teams. It's about people, you know. And then Walt said in one of the chats, you know, duh, SEM is about people. And I just want to keep that in mind, because then Peter Bassett later on went and made a statement that said, we got to know customers. Right? And kind of what I was just thinking, I had this aha moment when Peter said that, and I thought, do we? We're with them all the time, but are we asking them questions to improve our program design? Or are we focused so much on implementation that we're making assumptions about our participants? So I just kind of had that. It all came together between those two sessions around, like, what can we do to engage more with the participants? And then kind of tangential to that, the other thing, you know, that we know from the funded research is that we learned that the participants really like peer-to-peer learning, or that's what our assumptions are. Anyways, so just something to think about is, how are you engaging with your participants to make sure that your program design is the best it could be and it actually is getting what they want? I think it's okay to ask them, are we doing it right? Beyond just, how was this workshop? That's my closing thought there for this.
Your sunglass.
Lose the sunglasses. What?
I know.
Boo, boo.
Maybe we have more sunglasses. Someone balance that out. This is great. Thank you all so much. This community is amazing. Just a wonderful group of smart and lovely people. They're doing fascinating and meaningful work, and it's only getting more and more meaningful. Keep it up. Hopefully you can all join us tomorrow. I understand some folks probably have other commitments you have to be at, but if you can't be there tomorrow, please try to catch up with your colleagues or follow up with us. And but otherwise, plan for tomorrow. Anything else, Wendy?
Speaking of that, I see two comments here. One is discuss the cutting edge of SEM. Tomorrow, we're discussing future design possibilities. It's all about the future. There's going to be a small breakout group about greenhouse gases. So we're really jumping into that in the smaller breakout groups, with at least 6 breakout groups per group, or kind of per section. So in theory, we're going to get a little bit smaller groups. We're doing the best we can. I also saw something that said more clear facilitation during breakout groups. Thanks for that feedback. We're going to work on that. That's one of the issues with having the number of breakout groups, is we have to have that number of facilitators. So if you ever want to help facilitate a breakout group, now is your chance. We can always use you with these webinars and these SEM summits. So I just want to say, some of that stuff we're going to take back. We're going to talk about it and hopefully come to you with a great schedule for tomorrow. And that's all I got. That's all she wrote.
Well done, everyone. We'll see you
Well
all tomorrow.
done.
Thank you all so much.
Well done, you guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll see you tomorrow. We'll finish strong tomorrow, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon or evening, wherever you are. And we'll talk to you more soon. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.